Hello and welcome to this presentation where I'm going to be going through some of the new features and functionality that have been released as part of Business Central 2022 Release Wave 1. That's version 20 if you talk in old money. This isn't a comprehensive list of all the improvements, but it's just some of the highlights that I've picked out that I think are most likely to be relevant to our customer base. The first thing I'm going to do is to show you how to activate some of this functionality, and then we'll get into the functionality itself. With these new features and functions I'm going to show you, some of them require switching on within your system. So if you want to switch them on, look for feature management, and then within the feature management you'll see new areas of functionality that have been released in this or potentially previous versions. With this list of functionality, it tells you when they will be automatically enabled, so after this date it will be switched on in your system whether you like it or not. But it gives you the ability to turn things on individually. So for instance, if I want to turn on the use tracking by package number and reservations, I can come in here and I can switch it to say enabled for all users, accept the message it gives you. That then becomes enabled in the system. There might be further setup you have to carry out to make that work, but you've actually turned the functionality on in this system. Another request we regularly receive from customers is to change the bank account details that display on sales documents. As standard, Business Central shows the bank details from the company information page. If however you generate an invoice in euros and have a euro bank account, you want to show those details on the invoice instead. The new functionality is set up from the bank account card. So here we have a euro bank account and we're going to tick this new field that says use as default for currency. You can only have one bank account specified as the default for each currency. We're now going to go back and we're going to create a new sales order for a euro customer. And what we'll see on this sales order on the invoice details tab is that company bank account code has now been filled in with the euro bank account. If we stick an item onto the order, and then we'll post this order. Ship an invoice set, and then look at the invoice that's been generated and print it out. What we'll then see on this invoice up here is that it's picked the euro bank and it's now showing the euro bank account on the sales invoice. This functionality also works the service orders, so it works in both areas of functionality in the system. In this version, Microsoft have made some improvements to the jobs module. In the past, you only be able to assign one customer to a job, for instance, a bill to customer. In the new version, if we have a quick look at this, you can assign a customer to the job. So we're going to assign Sport Myer Furnishings. You can also assign a bill to customer. So we can specify here a different customer we want to send the bills to. So if you've got a scenario where you're working with a group of companies, it might be that you're doing something for one particular company, but you send the bill to the parent company. You can now, on the jobs, assign the bill to and the sell to. They've also expanded to include the ship to address. So this is where you're actually carrying out the physical work. Maybe the customer that you're doing the work for has multiple addresses. In this case, they've got offices and warehouses. You can select the address you're sending it to, and then that is the ship to address for this particular job. This brings it more in sync with the functionality you've got on the sales side, which obviously the jobs ties into. You can also see here that the payment terms code has been added to the job. This means that you can pick different payment terms to those that you usually deal with this customer on. Additional functionality has also been added to the jobs to integrate it to the warehousing module. On the jobs, there is now under Actions, Warehouse, the ability to create inventory picks and warehouse picks. Obviously this is dependent on the setup of the locations that you've got on this particular job, but for this job I know that I'm linked to the silver location, so I can create an inventory pick. When I run the process, it's now created me one inventory pick that I can now navigate to and view the pick. From this pick, if I then post it, this is effectively carrying out a job journal in the background. So rather than having to manually fill out a job journal, I can now go through the warehousing process, pick the goods that I want to ship, and then post it. And now when I've posted this, this will now show up as a consumption against the job itself. So if we look at related, history, ledger entries, we can see we now have the usage there for that item already posted against the job, which has been carried out through the warehousing module. This is a really nice piece of functionality. We found we've actually carried out similar functionality. We had to create it and develop it ourselves in the past. So I think this is going to be super useful for an awful lot of customers. The standard dimension functionality has now been extended to locations as well. So from a location card, you can click on the dimensions action at the top, and in the same way as you can with other master data, such as customers, vendors, items, bank accounts, you can specify dimensions that you want to assign, or if you want to ensure that you always have a particular dimension posted against a transaction, you can now set this up at location level. Super handy if you want to work out, for instance, stock adjustments made per location or various expenses and costs that are posted to your GL per location as well. It's often been the case that a company in Business Central could be both a customer and a vendor. Historically, it's been very difficult to see visually how much money you owe them as a supplier and they owe you as a customer. For this new piece of functionality to work, you must be using the contacts and contact business relationships within Business Central, so the system knows how to associate a customer with a vendor. We can see here that Guildford Water Department has two business relationships. It's both a customer and a vendor. If you go back to the customer list, here we see Guildford Water Department as a customer who have an outstanding balance. They also have, in this fact box over here, you'll see a balance as a vendor. If we open the customer card, you can see the balance as a vendor is portrayed and sat right next to the balance on the general tab, so very easy and very visible. If we then go to the vendor list, you'll see the same in reverse. This is the Guildford Water Department as a vendor with a balance, but also, as we see here in the fact box, a balance as a customer. We go into the customer card and we can see the balance and the balance as a customer, nice and visible. Now we're going to have a look at the payment journal. So if you're about to make a payment to a vendor, you might want to check first if you've got any customer facing ledger entries that can be applied against those. Now you can see that within the payment journal there is a new functionality under Prepare called Net Customer and Vendor Balances. When we run this process, there are a few options. So you can specify the order that it suggests the entries in. You can specify some vendor filters, a description, document numbers, etc. So we'll run this just on our vendor 30,000, which is the Guildford Water Department. This is then brought through all of the vendor entries for the relevant vendor and all of the customer entries, and has applied them to each other. If we're happy with that, we can then go through and click on the post button and post the journal. Once the journal has been posted, it obviously applies the vendor and the customer ledger entries against each other. And if we wish to, we can send a remittance advice to the vendor explaining what we've done. A nice quick one, this one. If you have a number of sales orders or purchase orders that you wish to release in bulk or reopen in bulk, there's now the functionality here to release reopen from the list. So you can select multiple documents, mark release, it tells you how many you're releasing, 5 in this case, click yes, and they're released. And if you want to reopen them, click the reopen, and they're reopened. Since deferrals were introduced 6 or 7 years ago, they've been a very valuable feature within Business Central. However, one major restriction has been the dates in which you can post to the deferral. Either at a company level or an individual user level, you need to have your allow posting from and to dates opened up as far forward as you wish to post a deferral. So for instance, if you're posting something which is to be deferred over 3 years, you need to have an allow posting to date set 3 years in the future. There's also a risk associated with that. So thankfully now in the new version they've expanded the allow posting from and to functionality. On the general ledger setup there are now 2 new fields, allow deferral posting from and allow deferral posting to, which is obviously set at a company level. And also on the user setup, the same fields have been added there as well. So you can allow individual users, maybe accounts users for instance, to be able to post deferrals into a longer range into the future. Additionally, on the deferral template card, there's now an additional option here, so the start date on deferrals can now be set to be the beginning of the next calendar year. If you work in Business Central and post documents regularly, You'll know one of the most infuriating things is when someone hasn't filled out the information correctly and you get an error message when you're trying to post a document. There's new functionality which you can switch on in the general ledger setup that allows the system to check prior to posting whether there are potential issues with the document or the journal. So on the general tab of general ledger setup, you can turn on the enable data check functionality. And then if you reload the system, and we're going to the general journal now, you can see that there will be an error box that appears on the general journals. We now have this journal check in the top right corner. In the journal check, it tells you how many lines have been checked and how many lines have issues. You can drill down on the issues total and it gives you a warning message about what the error is. So in this case, I can see that I'm missing the department code for GL account 5710 in line 450,000. Now that line number may not mean anything to you. However, Microsoft have very kindly now given us an open related record action. So if we click on that, it opens up the journal again and takes us straight to the line with the issue. This line here, 5710 for fuel tax. If I scroll across, you can see it's missing a department code. So I'm going to fill in sales, select it and tab out of it. And then if I go back, you see the error message vanishes and I can then return to my journal where I have no issues remaining, and I can then go and post the journal. This functionality also exists on documents. So if we have a quick look at sales invoices, for instance, open up trade research, we'll see the similar kind of error box up here. So up here we've got check document, issue totals 1, and again, same kind of thing. It says the dimension value code large for dimension code customer group is missing. So we now know we need to resolve that issue before we can post this invoice. I think that's a really useful piece of functionality and hopefully it will save a lot of frustration, particularly in the account departments when they're coming to post large volumes of documents and journals. In Business Central, there's been a function called Find Entries for a number of years. In previous versions, such as Navision or Nav, this was called Navigate. Fun fact time, the word Navision, or the name Navision, comes from the combination of the word navigate and vision. So the product was allowing you to navigate with vision. As the names moved on, however, they've done away with the navigate function. It's now been rebranded as Find Entries. So Find Entries allows you to find all transactions relating to a particular record you're on. So this invoice, when I click on Find Entries, it shows me all of the related entries from it. This functionality has now been expanded. So from the home page, if we click back to the home page, you'll now see on our actions here, there is a Find Entries button. If we click on that, we then have a number of different options. So we can search for different documents in the system. We can search for business contacts, such as customers and vendors and individual people. And we can search for item references. We're going to search for documents again. You've also got more options here. You've got document number, posting date, and external document number. So for instance, if a customer rings you up and wants to find out about a particular transaction, if they can give you their PO number, so we'll say PO0055, and hit enter, and find, it will then find all the transactions relating to that particular PO number of theirs. Obviously there could be the same PO number from multiple customers, so you need to be aware of that. But in this example, we can now go through, we can see the individual sales invoice, we can open that up, we can see the GL entries, we can see the posted shipments, we can see all the bits of information relating to that particular customer's order number. So quite a useful addition. The ability to block records in Business Central prevents people from incorrectly selecting a no longer used record. This functionality has been extended now to general posting setup and VAT posting setup. So for instance, if as a business you no longer use a particular combination of setup, you can now move into these pages, find the record you want to block, so domestic VAT 20 for instance, and tick it as being blocked. Once you've selected blocked, it will then error if you try and use it in any documents. So if I go and have a look at sales order now, and open up a sales order here, which is using one of those combinations of records. So this is a domestic GB customer with bicycle. You can see there's an error appeared here in the new check document functionality box that said the setup is blocked for the VAT posting combination. Again, you can use it on the general posting setup as well. It's great if you, for instance, a group of companies and use a templated company and you create new companies on a regular basis, you can block certain combinations of posting setup for certain companies. Another quick one. Report selections have been introduced for jobs. In previous versions, you've been able to specify which report you want to use for different sales documents, purchase documents, service documents, etc. But now they've introduced it for jobs. Currently, the only report that you can specify is the job quote, in this case, report 1016. However, the implication from Microsoft is that in future versions, they might be introducing new reports to use for jobs. So hopefully there'll be some changes coming up in the future around the jobs functionality in the system. This next piece of functionality is a nice starter from Microsoft, however it's got the feeling of not being quite finished yet. It's called bank deposits. So this is primarily to be used if you deposit multiple payments to the bank at a single time. So here we are on the bank deposit screen. If I click out of the number field, it would automatically assign me a number. I then pick the bank account that I wish to deposit the money into, in this case GBP, and the total value of the deposit. So let's say it's £500. Set the posting date, nice and simple, make it today's date. This field here, the post as lump sum, this is set from a field on the sales receivable setup. So you can either set it as a lump sum or not as a lump sum. It doesn't make a great deal of sense to not have this set. The idea is that you get one single bank ledger entry created from the deposit. So I think you always want that to be switched on. So that's on. Again, we can set the document date. You can set dimensions. So there's the global dimensions, department and project code. And the currency code obviously flows from the bank account that you specified. And then on the lines, you can say what type of entry is it you're posting. So maybe if you've got some petty cash you want to deposit, you can say it's a GL account, and then we'll type in cash, find our petty cash account, and we'll say that £100 of this is going to be petty cash. You know, what's the document type? Is it a payment or a refund? Well, that's a matter of the petty cash, and a document number. Again, this doesn't fill in automatically, which is slightly strange because this is effectively a batch, so it should fill in, but it's not. So we'll just put in cash in there, and maybe we've also received some money from a customer. So maybe it's a check that they left in the office, or maybe I don't know, something else. So Selangorian, it says a payment and an amount. We're going to say it's £400 for that. Now we're filling the document number, so as we said, it's a check there. You can, under the functions, apply this entry to an existing customer record. So this is similar to a cash receipt journal, for instance, but you can't drill down. You've got to click on the actions, which seems a little bit strange. So we could say that we want to apply it to, let's take this bottom one there, set the applies to ID, click OK. And then once you've completed that, you can check the difference. So we've got the total deposit of £500, two lines there that sum up to 500, therefore the difference is 0. And you can post it. So hit post. This then creates you a posted bank deposit. So this is a record that you can go back and review in the future if you so wish. So we can see the posted bank deposit there. We now come back from that. This is our bank account card here. Let's refresh that. You can see we've got £1,750 in the account. If I drill down, you can see the deposit here of £500. There's also the option from the entry action up here to view the bank deposit lines, so we can see those two lines that we put on the bank deposit. So again, that's quite nice. You've got visibility there when you've made a deposit into the bank. So we then go and have a quick look at the bank account reconciliations. If I open up bank account reconciliation, which is in progress, you can see here then that I've got the single lines being brought through there for the £500 for that single bank deposit. So again, it's a nice piece of functionality. It's a quick way of being able to reconcile when you've done a lump sum to the bank, but it feels like there's a little bit of tidying up needed by Microsoft just to make it a really nice piece. One last feature I want to show is the new ability to edit reports in Excel. So here we can have a look at the summary aging report. I'm going to run the report, and then there's an option to send to, and then Microsoft Excel document data only. It's very important to send the data only out. So click OK, it exports it to Excel for you. Then when it opens up, what you'll get is the data from that report exported out to Excel. So there it is. You can then manipulate that. So you can do pivot tables, you can put slices in, you can create charts, whatever you want, and save them on a separate tab. So you need to create a new tab. So as in Blue Peter, here's one I prepared earlier. So here I've got a sheet where I've got a basic pivot table on it, and then I've got a sheet with some pie charts on it. A customer balance, so you can see the balance by different customers, and then also a breakdown of the amount we're owed in local currency by different currencies. So how exposed are we to different currencies? So now we need to flick back into Business Central. So I'll close that. Back into Business Central. Now we need to find the report layouts page. So up here you search for report layouts. And we're going to create a new one. So I know that report happened to be report 105. You can search on the report to find out what report number it is, but we'll enter 105 in there. We'll give it a name, so graph, a description, graph will do again. Format is Excel, it's okay to that. And now we import the layout that we've just designed. So in this case, it's my summary aging layout there. We'll open that. That's now imported it as a layout. We then need to tell the system what layout we want to use. So report layout selection. We say for report 105. So down here, report 105, I now want to use an Excel report. The graph one I just imported, okay. Come out of that. And if we now rerun that report again, so reports, finance, summary aging, it gives us the option to download it. So we download it, open our report up. And then we can see the report with the layouts. And obviously as the data changes, so will what we see in the graphs change. So there, by enabling it, you can now see that US dollars has appeared in that graph. Very nice, simple piece of functionality, gives you a whole world of different reporting you can carry out as standard from the system. So that's the end of the highlights that I've picked out. If you want to see a full list of it, then you should be able to see the link in the chat in this webinar. Or if not, you can go to the address that's on screen now and then navigate down through SMB, Dynamics 365 Business Central, what's new and planned, and you'll see a complete list of all the new features. If any of you have got any questions, please feel free to pop them into the chat and we can either go through them now or we'll follow up after the session's finished. Thank you very much for listening.